Spanish territory in North Africa. At least 67 of them died trying, and Spain thinks its neighbor may have let it happen on purpose. Here's the Ceuta crisis and why a border incident just became a diplomatic one. First, the basics. Ceuta is a small Spanish city on the North African coast, surrounded by Morocco on land, one of two Spanish territories in Africa along with Melilla. Because it's Spanish soil, it's also European Union soil, which makes its border one of the EU's external frontiers. Starting Thursday morning, close to 50,000 migrants rushed the border, some over land, many swimming or crossing at a breakwater barrier that extends into the sea. Spain's Interior Ministry logged land arrivals up 164% compared to the same period last year. In the chaos, drownings at the breakwater, a stampede to get over the barrier, at least 67 people died. Spain's response was immediate: emergency personnel, and an announcement that a new 500-meter containment barrier would be built along the breakwater specifically. Within days, most of those who crossed had already returned to Morocco. Tens of thousands went back, according to Spain's Interior Ministry. But Ceuta's local president says the city still hasn't returned to normal. Here's what makes this more than a one-day tragedy. Nobody thinks 50,000 people crossed a heavily controlled border in 24 hours by accident. This has happened before, a smaller version in 2021, when around 8,000 to 10,000 migrants crossed after a diplomatic falling out between Spain and Morocco. The pattern raised the same question then that it's raising now. Did Moroccan authorities loosen border controls on purpose? The timing lines up with something specific. Spain has recently been warming relations with Algeria, Morocco's regional rival. Some analysts and Spanish officials suspect Morocco may have eased up on border enforcement as a pressure tactic, a way of reminding Spain how much leverage it holds simply by controlling migration flows toward Europe. Morocco's ambassador to Spain has pushed back directly, saying the situation was not wanted by the Kingdom of Morocco. Spain, for its part, has publicly rejected the idea that this was deliberately manufactured retaliation, at least officially. Whether or not it was intentional, the effect is the same. Migration has become one of the sharpest tools in the relationship between Europe and its North African neighbors, because a government that controls its side of the border can, in effect, control how much pressure Europe feels. That's why the European Commission's response mattered. Vice President Margaritas Schinas called this a European border issue, not just a Spanish one, which is the EU, signaling it sees Ceuta as a test of how the bloc's external frontier holds up under pressure, not a local incident. Domestically in Spain, this is also becoming a political fight. Opposition parties are blaming the government's migration policy and its handling of the Morocco relationship for letting this happen, which means the crisis isn't just playing out at the border, it's playing out in Spanish politics too. Three things worth tracking. First, whether Spain formally accuses Morocco of orchestrating this, or keeps its current, more cautious public position. That distinction will shape whether this becomes a full diplomatic rupture or gets quietly smoothed over, which is usually how these episodes have ended before. Second, watch what the EU actually does beyond statements of solidarity. Frontline support, funding, or pressure on Morocco tends to follow these incidents, and how fast and how far that goes will tell you how seriously Brussels is treating this one compared to 2021. Third, watch Ceuta itself over the coming weeks. Spain says most people have already returned to Morocco, but returned doesn't mean the underlying pressure has disappeared. If crossings spike again, that's a strong sign this was a controlled pressure tactic rather than a one-off failure of border control. The short version, this is technically a border incident, but the real story is what migration has become in Europe's relationship with North Africa, a pressure valve that governments can open or close depending on what they want politically. 60,000 people and 67 deaths later, the question isn't just how Ceuta recovers. It's whether this was a one-time crisis or a preview of how this leverage gets used again. That's the story for today. If you want to see how this develops, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.